Hi, welcome to Far From Eden. If you've been here before, you'll notice the little StreamYard duck. I guess he used to be right there. He's gone because I finally figured out how to do that. It's not complicated. It's super easy. I always had, the right plan to do it. I just, if you've been here before, you understand that I'm allergic to technology. And if you haven't been here before, you're probably going to be one of those people like, come on, lady, get to the point. You're right. Men are in crisis in the West. And I know for sure here in the States. And you guys have told me in other countries, specifically Australia, you guys have told me how bad it is. You've told me how bad it is in England, and a spattering of other, anecdotal tales from other parts of generally the West. Y'all are in crisis. And honestly, the irony is you're in crisis. Nobody seems to care. And if you do care, you have to care in the right way. You have to say the right things. I think it was last weekend we did a video. It's a collaboration between, the chat and me. We did a video, and it was reading an article and talked about discussing, men's issues in the dark corners of the internet. And I was like, I think that's where we are. So once again, welcome to one of the dark corners on the internet, because we're going to talk about it. I like to find articles and examples from the mainstream. It is not because I like the mainstream news, corporate media, however you like to describe the propaganda people. But I think what I like to do is use what I find in the propaganda, I'll just call it propaganda, to see sort of like a litmus test of where are they? What are they planning next? And I feel like you can observe what they will tell you and why and what they want you to think. And you can kind of go, oh, I see what you're doing there. Now, full disclosure, I have a permanent tinfoil hat, just sewn into my head. I think it's grown out of my head by now, actually. Because I'm like, wow, there's a reason they wanted to make us think that thinking that any conspiracy is going on, you must be crazy, you must be dangerous, you must be all this. There's a reason they wanted to put those together. And it was right after JFK met his untimely demise in Dallas in 1963. If you didn't believe the Warren Commission, which was the official narrative of this is exactly what happened, if you didn't think that was the case, you were a conspiracy theorist, because you theorized that it was not Lee Harvey Oswald, the lone gunman from the Texas Book Depository, that did the deed. It was actually, if you don't think that, right? And you think, oh, it was CIA or FBI or mafia or whatever, that would be a conspiracy of people to commit the thing and to cover it up. You must be nuts. And they'll do this. They'll say, do you know how many people would have to be involved to pull that off? And so, and we heard that in 2020, didn't we? When some of us doubted some things, what did we hear back? We heard, do you know how many people would have to be? That's crazy. All these countries and all these scientists, and they would have to all be in it. Yeah. And I don't have to use a lot of words, because I think I know you guys, and I already know you know. So YouTube doesn't have to get offended. Anyway, so speaking of the normies and speaking of the corporate media and all the rest of it, I don't think you can get more mainstream and corporate this and like you can't get more how they want you to be than American Surgeon General's warning: American men are in crisis. Well, the Surgeon General is going to explain it to us, boys and girls. And I'm bracing myself because I have seen part of this. I have not read through it. And I want to go through it with you. It's going to be something. I have a feeling. This particular Surgeon General was first became Surgeon General under Barack Obama, was Surgeon General for Donald Trump, and is still Surgeon General under our President Biden. I hope you haven't just eaten. Oh, golly. Okay. Okay, are you ready? There's no way on God's green earth the Surgeon General is going to say, you know what, men are in crisis. They really want to have real wives. They value tradition. They're tired of being maligned for who they are. That's not what he's going to say. I already know. This, by the way, was April 20th of this year, 2024, and it was published in The Ink. And they also have a Substack. And to get the full article, you have to subscribe to their Substack, which it's okay, they get a free trial. So that's what we did. Surgeon General's warning. I can't stall anymore. American men are in crisis. Dr. Vivek Murthy, TH, not the PH. He's not of, English descent. He is an Indian of Indian descent. Anyways, Vivek Murthy talks to us about the crisis of American masculinity, why pro-democracy leaders struggle to speak to the emotions, and whether social media should be banned for minors. It's going to be a bumpy road, this. This is going to be bumpy. All right. What is a pro-democracy leader? We're not a democracy. We're a republic. Democracy is mob rule. Ban social media. Bring parents back. I could talk for half an hour on this little intro, but I won't. I promise. I haven't seen you guys. I haven't seen you guys in a few days, so I get super excited. So I need to shut up and keep reading. Dr. Vivek Murthy, the Surgeon General of the United States, is an unusual doctor, but unusual in a way that is on the rise. He is a doctor whose primary interests are problems not often thought of as medical. He has the authority to prescribe medicine, but the remedies he is interested in can't be bought at a pharmacy. He is part of a wave of public health doctors and thinkers who in recent years have sought to make us look at health more holistically. These doctors want us to see more of our health challenges as connected to the larger choices and problems of the society, and to see more of our problems as matters of health. That's a lot of words. And we didn't say very much. We're already getting into like political speak here. But public health doctors and thinkers. I hope we're all thinkers, but okay. And also, I have to say this, and I will say this carefully because this is the thing that will set off YouTube the most, who in recent years have sought to make us look at health more holistically. Really? You're going to say that? that in recent years, you've wanted us to look at health holistically, because I think it's been pretty much, no, you need to take a medicine. And, we're not going to talk about working out. We're not going to talk about, being fit. We're not going to talk about, in fact, being fit is right-wing extremism. We're not going to talk about getting, sunlight, vitamin D. We're not going to talk about that. So this holistically thing, gaslighting. This is gaslighting. I stay away from that word because, sometimes women like to use that a lot, and not just like, you keep using that word. I do not think it means what you think it means. That's gaslighting. Because that is not what you've been doing. You have not been telling us to think of our health more holistically. I've never met a doctor that was like that, honestly. Murthy, who is now in his second term as Surgeon General, has made loneliness in particular his big focus. You felt it, I've felt it, we've all felt it. But Murthy thinks it's a shared social and, yes, health problem, as much as is, say, cancer or diabetes. I wish this had been a widespread doctrine when I was in middle school. I wish they'd thought about that a few years ago when we had to stay separate from each other for our health. And some of us were alone for a long time and starved for human affection and interaction. Not talking about myself, talking primarily about older people who couldn't see their grandkids. But this isn't about that. This is about men being in crisis. I'm not talking about a few years ago. Today, we bring you this really special conversation with the United States Surgeon General that touches on so many themes we have been pursuing at the Inc. Why are would-be authoritarians better at connecting to the anxious and fearful and adrift than democratically minded, fact-based leaders? And does it have to be that way? What they mean is, why are conservatives better at connecting to and understanding the problems men face, and the leftists, fact-based leaders, are missing the mark? I redid, I fixed it for them. Yeah, it has to be that way. If you're really listening to the men, it's that way. Is capitalism ultimately to blame for the isolation so many Americans now experience? Why are so many American men in crisis? And is it possible to hold simultaneously in one's mind the thoughts that A, men have been fussed over too long already, and B, if we don't help men cope with the transition to a more gender equal society, everyone will suffer? Is social media for minors more like tobacco or like opioids? And therefore, should it be banned outright for young people or just better regulated? Oh, you guys, this is a really special conversation. You won't want to miss it. Oh gosh. Okay, so it's an interview. I'm going to be tempted to make different voices, but we're not reading a fairy tale today, so I'm going to try to spare you. Okay. All right, so this is the interviewer. I've seen you discuss the crisis of loneliness, not just as something we see happening to individuals, but as having to do with the bigger political and institutional crises in the country. Heading into an election year, how do you make the connection between loneliness and isolation and the rise of authoritarian movements, fascist movements, the kind of interest in violence that's made its way into the mainstream from the corners of political life? There's so much. Okay. This is the response from the Surgeon General. Vivek says, well, our relationships with one another are a critical part of how we root ourselves in the world and how we buffer stress and adversity in our lives. And when we don't have that connection, we are more deeply impacted by uncertainty and adversity around us, and also we feel more threatened. It's true. In that state, we are more likely to be impacted by forces that would divide us, that would polarize society, and would try to compel us to take extreme action in the face of that threat. Well, isn't that just a complete admission? How many of us have said, I know this is not what this article is supposed to be about, but sometimes it takes a turn, doesn't it? How many of us have said that a few years ago, the lockdowns and all of that happened, and we said, wow, this has really polarized people. It was 2020 and the lockdowns kicked in right around the time that the campaigns for the 2020 election were really revving up, because obviously election day in the United States, I just realized we have international people. In the United States, our election is the second Tuesday in November, right? So first Tuesday, God, always when the camera's on, I'm like, brain doesn't work. Anyway, it's in the beginning of November. And if the camera wasn't rolling, I would know what it is. Anyway, it's the beginning of November, right? And lockdowns really got going. Yeah, it was 2 weeks to slow the spread in March here. But around the summertime and then into the fall was when we were, really getting after lockdowns and stuff like that. And so we were isolated and divided. And look what happened. We became more polarized. And what does it say? It polarized society, and that compels us to take extreme action in the face of whatever threat. So people acted more extreme. They just admitted it. And I know it's not about that, but I'm like, you got to point it out. I am a firm believer that they tell you what they're going to do, or they have to tell you. That's why we see so many things that seem to foretell of pandemics or wars or this or that or the other. It's a very spiritual, biblical way to look at it. Like Satan has to tell you what he's going to do. All right. So it's still Surgeon General Vivek Murthy speaking. I'll just give you an example. If someone told me that my child was in imminent danger and they convinced me that they are the only ones that could help, I would overlook a lot of shortcomings, a lot of fundamental moral disagreements I had with that person. I'd put aside a lot of concerns about the impact that they might have on other parts of my life or the world if I thought they could save what was most important to me. And that is one of the reasons why I'm concerned about this loneliness epidemic that we're experiencing, not just in the United States, but around the world. It has profound impacts for individual health, physical and mental, but it also has a profound impact on the health of society. And I don't think it's a coincidence that we're seeing increasing polarization and division at a time where our connections to one another have deeply frayed. Indeed. Weird. It's too bad. It's too bad that was totally organic and it wasn't anything that, the people in charge orchestrated. But that was for our safety. It was for our safety. So, it's fine. It's fine. We're fine. If you are watching through subtitles, that was sarcasm. Back to the interviewer. With the exception of you making this case publicly and often, it seems to me that often the very purveyors of division you mention are much better at diagnosing what's going on than the people you're allied with have been. Yeah, the conservatives are doing a better job helping people than the leftists are. I mean, they said it. Demagogue, soon as they say it, I'm like, oh, never mind. Demagogues are better at understanding the status anxiety felt by white folks in a changing country than people who actually want progress. I'm sorry, I stumbled all over that because my brain was rejecting it. Let me try that again. Demagogues are better at understanding the status anxiety felt by white folks in a changing country than people who actually want progress. Jordan Peterson is better at responding to the fact of a masculinity crisis than people who are talking to men in good ways. So this is saying that Jordan Peterson is a demagogue. He became famous when he was standing against a bill in Canada that would compel speech, because he doesn't because he has studied government control. He knows where it leads. He literally said that in the famous clip of him taking on the students who thought it was about something else when it was about compelled speech. They thought it was about what he was being compelled to say rather than he was being compelled to say something. And they couldn't get past that, which was very convenient for all of it, because you can hide compelled speech with another issue and get all the people who are excited about that issue to push it, not realizing that, hey, this means they can compel your speech too, dingy. So what I'm saying is that, I mean, fine to just be like, Jordan Peterson's a demagogue. If he was in the room, would you say that to him? Because he would wipe the floor with you in an argument. And apparently the leftists are talking to men in good ways. So I guess, if you need some advice, listen to Destiny. Can you talk about why a lot of the people in the administration you work for, the people aligned with you, are not really thinking at the level of effect, and why the bad guys in many cases are much smarter about that? Okay, so we're the bad guys. We're the bad guys. I mean, okay. This is up is down and down is up. Sure. One of the challenges that, this is Vivek speaking, the Surgeon General of the United States. One of the challenges that we've seen recently is that sometimes we forget that human beings are both cerebral and emotional creatures. We are all that way. We have the capacity to feel. We have the capacity to think. But one of the things I learned early on in medical school is you have to recognize and treat both parts of a human being. If somebody comes in with, let's say, congestive heart failure, and they're in the hospital because the swelling in their legs is worsening, if all you do is give them a diuretic, a water pill to help remove some of that water and reduce the swelling, but you fail to recognize that because they were unable to walk because of that swelling in their legs, they just missed their daughter's wedding, they've been missing out on many important family moments. When you miss a really important part of then you miss a really important part of how their illness has affected them. Yeah? Yes, that's true. But is that your job as the doctor? Would I rather have you thinking about, the biology of why my heart is failing? Or do I want you thinking about my social life and all that? I don't know if that's the best thing. I think we need doctors to be doctors, and we need families for the rest of the stuff. But let's just keep on going with what he's saying. And this is one of the reasons you sometimes find in medicine that patients will go to a doctor, and though, even by the book, they'll get the right treatment, the right antibiotic, the right medication, they'll come away feeling that they weren't seen and heard and understood. So you have to treat the whole patient. And that's more than just getting the cerebral part right. I disagree. And I feel like I'm not a doctor, but I've been going to the doctor, and if you're new here, I have multiple sclerosis. I hate mentioning it all the time, but it comes up. it's a fairly progressive form, and I was officially diagnosed at 22. So now in my mid 40s, when he's talking about this, I can definitely speak to this. You need your family to do all this other stuff they're talking about. Absolutely, yes, we're more than just thinking. But this whole feelings thing, this is matriarchal. And I personally don't think that's the best way to go about something that is, I want them to be sticking to the facts. You know, I want them to be sticking to the facts of diagnosing, you know, properly, giving me a prognosis, you know, getting the treatment right. Let's keep all of our energy on that and not divert it elsewhere, because that's what we have families for. Oh, Vivek goes on. So what we have to recognize is that, yes, there are material concerns that people have in their lives around the economy, around safety, around other challenges like a housing crisis. But there is also a deeper spiritual crisis that's taking place in many of our communities, in our country, and in the world more broadly. A crisis that's marked by people feeling a greater sense of disconnection from one another, feeling unmoored or disconnected from sources of meaning and purpose in their lives. Well, yeah, when you remove God from a society where most people used to be Christian, and most of us, that's what our family history goes back to. If it hasn't been kept alive, it's weird. It's weird how you remove God and you go, it's not working. And they'll try to point at everything. And it's like, look, you took God away, you destroyed the family. But I'm sure that's not it. It's all these demagogues and bad guys. Okay. This is so many words so far, and what have we really said? Except that y'all and me, we're bad. We're bad guys, but we're good at addressing this issue. That's what I've gotten so far, and we're isolated. But we don't have any idea why. That's my summary so far. On page 6 now we are, okay? So this is a place where policy matters, but policy alone is not enough to address the deeper pain in people's lives. We've got to listen, we've got to understand and address both the pragmatic and the deeper emotional spiritual crisis that people are going through right now. Indeed. Otherwise, we leave people feeling like we're not seeing them, we're not hearing them, we're not understanding what's really going on in their lives. Would that make the difference, though? If somebody is lacking purpose, they don't know why they're here, they don't know why they were created, where they came from, what they're made, are they just like a sack of stardust, or are they made in God's image? You know, that can make a difference how you perceive the world. And when you don't have any purpose, and if you don't know what the purpose is, you might as well not have one in your thinking. If somebody's like, I see you, I hear you, if that worked, then all these Gen Z, that's all these Gen Z kids have been told. That's all these teachers have been telling kids for like at least a decade in school. You've just had feelings being validated. It's almost like that doesn't work. Okay. Back to the interviewer. This makes me think we have a lot of well-meaning leaders who are much more comfortable talking about the cerebral aspect. Biden's very good at talking about the cerebral. He's just too brainy, you know? He needs to really, I can't, you guys. Okay, it's not about that. Okay, the cerebral aspect. building bridges, or the price of a drug, or expanding Medicaid, these kinds of hard but fundamentally policy things, what? Then they are comfortable talking about the things you're talking about. Good Lord, these people are in journalism? Again, they were just told how wonderful they are and how good they are and everything. And it's like, the standards have lowered. And what I mean is journalists and students have been told that. I don't know anything about the person or doing the interview. It didn't say. I'm not speaking about any group of people. Just in case YouTube wants to get a Snickers and a bunch. Okay, Vivek responds. Well, it is a really good point you bring up, and I think it reflects a broader cultural trend over the last several decades, where we've decided that certain skills and topics are hard skills and others are soft. And we put things like intellectual analysis, details of policy, numeric-based assessments in this category of hard skills. If I can talk about numbers, if I can talk about concrete deliverables, if I talk about moving the needle on a metric, then okay, that has real value. But the other stuff, the soft stuff, is seen as less valuable, or as stuff that you don't need to have a skill to do. That's because if you want me to draw up the plans of a building to build it, that building's gonna fall down because of my particular math skills and, aptitude for such things. But I can talk to you about feelings and emotions, and I can understand people pretty well. When it comes to building a shelter, getting food, stuff like that, and versus the stuff that I'm particularly good at, which one is more likely to keep you alive? It's not my skills. So yeah, there's a difference between hard skills and soft skills. That's why a bunch of us are saying, hey, you don't need to go to college unless it's for like something that you really have to learn to do. Otherwise, you're just, you can just go read books on your own. But also don't think that that qualifies you to do anything unless you're just going to teach what you read about. And even then, if I'm in a survival situation, I don't want the philosophy guy with me. You know what I mean? So, yeah, this is cloaked. We are starting to get into, I think, because this is hidden. Hey, men aren't better than women at stuff. Stop prioritizing the things men are good at. That's what I'm getting from this. Because women tend to be the soft skill people. I'm fine with that. Somebody has to be. Somebody has to, it's okay. It's fine. I'm fine complimenting a man. I'm not so insecure as to think that it means I am not valuable or not as valuable. Okay, so hard skills, soft skills. He just said other stuff, the soft stuff seen as less valuable, blah, blah, blah. He says, Vivek, the Surgeon General says, that couldn't be farther from the truth. And it betrays a fundamental misunderstanding of human beings. To go back to the example from medicine, when you understand and recognize and address the emotional needs of a patient, they often more deeply appreciate what you did for their physical needs. So is that for you, the doctor, then? Because so you can feel appreciated? Is this what doctors do? I just did quadruple bypass on the guy, and he just doesn't seem grateful. He's not appreciating me. Like I didn't get a thank you card. I'm going to change how I do this. I don't think that's the case. I'm not sure. I personally never experienced where someone's like, well, I did have, say it from the other side, I did have quadruple bypass surgery, but I just feel like the doctor didn't think of the whole, no. They're like, thank you for unclogging my ticker, You did your job. Who is over here expecting the cardiologist to be their therapist, to manage their social schedule, right? Who's doing that? That's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. Like, and if you're a doctor and you think, oh, I need to do the things that make me appreciated, then you need to stop being a doctor, because your focus is not on what it needs to be on. Okay, this is still the Surgeon General talking. This is something that anyone who has been in conversation or in a relationship with a spouse or with a child can understand. Yeah, but that's not your doctor. Is he a woman? What's happening? What is happening? Have you guys had this lately, where you're talking to a male person, a man, you're talking to a man, born a man, is a man, all the things, and they're saying things, and you're, why do you think like a woman? This has happened more and more. I've pointed it out. I'm like, that's like how a woman would approach something. And all I can think when that happens is, I'm like, were they raised by a single mother? Or, because you don't even have to be raised by a single mother, if the raising of the children is female dominant, like the woman's in charge of it, even when there is a father in the home, and I put father in quotation marks because I don't mean he's actually the father, the disciplinarian, the leader, right? He's just the guy that has to work and do chores and be yelled at by the mom. Like, that's not going to give you, that's not a father in the home. So you're going to get some fatherless home results when all you have is a dad and you don't have a father. And I think that's how you get some of these millennial, especially I've seen it in millennials, where I'm like, well, God, they weren't raised by a single mom, so where is this coming from? And I'm like, oh. But sometimes, and I don't want to say it's almost worse, but in a way it is, because if you're in a home and there's a mother and a father, but the mother emasculates the father constantly, almost alienates the children from the dad, like without divorcing him, but just in the home, just talks about him, emasculates him, etc., and is the disciplinarian and stuff, you're gonna get men who grow up thinking that feelings are an appropriate thing to base all of your actions on. I can't imagine being a physician, and especially like a specialist, and thinking I've got to make sure that their social schedule's intact. I'm not saying be a robot. Believe me, I've seen enough neurologists. I know about robot doctors, and I can't stand robot doctors. They need to be human. But this is too far. Yeah. And Vivek, the Surgeon General, goes on. These things are synergistic. When we don't value these two dimensions of ourselves equally, we don't train people in institutions to think about how to communicate with the people they're serving on both levels. What? This is university speak. We don't train people in institutions. Like, what institutions? Government? School? What does he mean? What does he mean by that? Families train people. We overweight for the cerebral, we underweight for the emotional. And the result is that we fail to connect with people on the issues that matter most. People wouldn't feel like they have these needs if those needs were being met in the home by their parents when they're young, their spouse when they're, when they go off to make a family for themselves. And of course, what about single people? Well, what about single people? Generally, I don't think you're supposed to be single, especially women. And I know that women will probably take issue with that. I'm not saying that I think there needs to be a law where women have to get married. I just think it's not the best for us to be single. I'm pretty darn sure that in the Bible where, it said that, where Paul says that it's better to be single, he's talking about men. Because back then, women couldn't live on their own. It was too dangerous. They needed a man to live, protection, provision, etc. Men don't need that. They don't have any kind of need that a woman provides. It's just true. And I guess it's fine because I'm in the dark corner of the internet. Oh, Lord have mercy. And this is part of the reason why so many people feel like they're not seen. One of the things that I found very early on during my first term as Surgeon General and was traveling the country on a listening tour is that so many people were telling me that they were invisible. Well, I wonder if he listened when the men said it. Because I haven't read anything so far that tells me he was listening when men said it. Although I will tell you right now, I doubt any men actually told him, because they're not going to, because they know that, it's funny, ironically, they know they're not going to be seen by this guy. How ironic. Like, how dare he sit there and say this when he will just call us names, call us demagogues, call us authoritarians, call us, the name that the little guy, the guy with the little mustache in Germany in the 30s and 40s, he'll call us that. So, hypocrite. I don't even need him. Y'all don't need him to see you. You just need him to stop, him and his people like him to stop, calling you names and calling you toxic. Good Lord. By the way, in my excitement, I scared Lola. Lola's my little dog, and we have a thing around here that when Lola distracts me, that's when I remember to ask you guys to please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Because I never remember, because I'm not a real YouTuber, don't plan on being one. I'm just here talking to you guys, trying to spread an important message. And again, because I see you. That's why I'm running defense. When people like this are like, people don't feel seen. Meanwhile, I'm reading this and I'm like, yeah, I don't feel like you see my brothers here. Okay, back to the interviewer. How much of this is downstream from the form of capitalism that America practices today? To be connected to others requires time, which is a function of how much you're paid, how much you can afford to take off, whether you work 60 hours a week or 40 or 35 or 80. For younger people today, it may be a function of whether you have an apartment big enough to invite 4 other people over for dinner. How do you think about the effect of policy choices around the wages people are paid, the labor protections people have, the bargaining power workers have as an upstream response to loneliness? Okay, I will translate that right now. And again, they haven't really talked about men yet, have they? They've just talked about, We need to be more feelings based. And this whole thing is basically, tell me more about how capitalism is evil and is the reason everybody is unhappy, and how we should be more communist. That's what that question was. If anybody was curious, that's what that was. So here's the good doctor's response. Look, I swear, it's like it's Barack Obama in disguise. When I'm reading the Surgeon General's words, I'm like, did you go to the same, are you the same creature? Look, I'm certainly a big supporter of innovation. I'm a big supporter of people being able to go out and build businesses and make other people's lives better by doing so. Okay? But one of the traps we've fallen into is that we have come to define productivity almost exclusively in economic terms. Whereas what we have undervalued is the time that people put into their relationships, into raising their children, the time they spend engaging in service to their community, the time they spend reflecting and growing. Yeah. You know why? Because government pushed everybody and propagandized everybody and brainwashed everybody into career is the most important thing. Career is going to give you fulfillment. Career, and I think a lot of men, especially Gen X and older, were like, career is how I support my family. But women fell for career is wonderful, and the men have been keeping us from it because it's amazing, and I'm going to be so fulfilled, and I'm going to change the world, et cetera, et cetera. And that's not what a job is. I mean, a job is a means to an end. For some people, they're like, no, I love my job, I don't know, whatever. But generally, no. Generally, it's a means to an end. It's survival. And for the overlords, it's for their taxes, and so their society can run and they can exist in it while we, the worker bees, do it. So it's funny that they're like, it's funny when they go, wow, this happened. It's like, it didn't happen. You guys did it. Funny. And when they talk about time people put into their relationships, they mean marriages. They didn't say anything about marriage or spouse here on purpose. You're sitting here, this is an article about men in crisis, and they're trying everything they can to not say what is actually wrong. But they've definitely pointed out that we are evil. We're authoritarian, we're demagogues. And we all should be thinking more with our feelings. I mean, that's the summary. I mean, it's really, there's nothing more than that, honestly, except for just more words. But I mean, it's not done yet. I'm just, okay. Yeah, we used to do that. We used to do all those things because we used to have families and we used to have God. We didn't have mega churches and prosperity preaching, which doesn't help you in real life when real stuff happens and you don't have a good outcome. Like the cancer isn't healed. The multiple sclerosis is aggressive. There's just, you lose a child. Like, life happens. And life is generally difficult, very difficult and painful. Struggle. That's okay. But when you remove the purpose of life, the reason we're here, where we came from, where we're going, then all of the difficulties and the pain of life becomes unbearable. And they act like, I have no idea. Da, da. And a lot of people, like millennials and Gen Z and Alpha, of course, they don't remember. They don't know that we used to have purpose. We used to know. We used to believe. And I don't mean believe like Santa Claus. I mean, we used to know. We used to know from whom we came. And we weren't lost like this. But it's okay, because I'm sure government's going to tell us what to do. Sarcasm works real well on YouTube because then I don't have to say anything controversial. I can just say what they want to hear, but I don't mean it. When you look at the statistic, it's still our friend Vivek, the doctor, speaking. When you look at the statistics, it's really striking to me that people are working more and parents are parenting more. I'm sorry. Okay. Parents are parenting more, even though they're working more. Okay, that's a sentence. That's one sentence. This is a physician speaking. He says, when you look at the statistics, it's really striking to me that people are working more and parents are parenting more, even though they're also working more. You can't. Have they cloned themselves? Are they in two places at once? Is that what's happening? Because that's not possible. You can't be parenting more and working more. You guys, like, what? All right, here we go. What's he gonna go? Where is he going with this? I'd like to know. I feel like we're getting, whew, it's revving up. He's got me. I'm angry now. I'm so angry I lost my spot because I do that. All right, we're parenting and working more somehow. I don't know how, but we're doing it. Actually, I think I skipped a whole paragraph. I'm losing my mind. Oh, good. Oh, awesome. It's even better. This is what I missed. This leads up to we're parenting and working more. Oh, that would all be billed as non-productive time from a purely economic perspective in today's terms. Yet, that is the investment that we need to make in order to build not only healthier individual lives, but a stronger society. And this is one of the reasons why so many parents feel like their work in parenting is undervalued. I wonder who those parents are and if they're mostly men or women. So we're in an article about men in crisis, and the first time we're really going to separate, we're going to talk about parents who feel undervalued. And I'll tell you who are the undervalued parents. Fathers are very undervalued, extremely undervalued. Who is more undervalued in our society than men? And when you drill it down even more, fathers. How do I know they're undervalued? Well, a woman will break up a marriage because she's not happy or she's bored or blah, 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 whatever it is. Okay, well, what does that have to do? Your boredom, your unhappiness, whatever. What does that have to do with what you say you love the most and are all about, your children? Well, a father figure's very important to them. And you're like, yeah, but I'm unhappy and bored, so it's fine. They'll still have a father. What's the big deal if he doesn't live in the house? Well, it's kind of a deal. It's kind of a big deal. And talk about being undervalued. For the longest time, custody to the mother automatically. Who's undervalued? Who is undervalued? Man, no. Nope. So then this is when he says what he says about the parents feeling like their work in parenting, feeling like their work is undervalued. Yeah, men don't feel like their work is undervalued. They know it just, as parents, they just know it is. I will say again, fathers are also undervalued when women say, well, you're always at work, you're at work all the time, blah, blah, blah. Who's paying for the house? Who's paying? Like, when he's the provider and the woman complains about how much work, how much time he's at work, et cetera, like he can't. But if he's, backs off, then she's going to throw a fit about, we don't have enough money. I want this. I want that. I got to have this house. I got to. Men are undervalued. My God. Wow. When you look at the statistics, it's really striking to me that people are working more and parents are parenting more, even though they're also working more. I know, it's the third time I've read it. I'm going to have brain damage from it. I was really startled recently to see statistics that show that the amount of time that both fathers and mothers are spending with their kids has increased significantly over the last few decades, even though parents are working more. You can't. What? Somebody make it make sense. They're working more, but they're spending more time. What time? And what do they define as time? Are they in the same room? Because one parent being on her phone and the kid has a tablet or has another screen in their face, that's not time with your children. That doesn't count. You're not teaching them. You're not engaging with them. You're not speaking to them. And you can tell these children, Gen Z, Gen Alpha, and then behind them is Gen Beta. And if you work with any of those, you can tell they have not been interacted with. These people have been interacting with a screen. This is baloney about parents have been working more, but they've had time with their kids has increased significantly over the last few decades. That's ridiculous. How can that possibly be true? With more parents working and fewer stay-at-home parents, do people just, I guess they just accept it. They'll just be like, yeah, okay, where is that time coming from? Yeah, that's what we want to know, right? Where's that time coming from, that extra time? You put all this together, and that time that is eroding is a time that we spend in person with family and friends, the time we spend for ourselves, and the time we spend for our communities. And that just reflects a fundamental miscalculation about what kind of productivity really matters here. I'm sorry. I don't know if that made sense to you guys, but that did not sound like it just a lot of words and didn't say much. Totally is political speak. We are on the 9th page, and we still have not talked about men and what's going on. We have not talked about the crisis. Jeez. Any model that pushes us to work more and more and more at the expense of our health and well-being and the health and well-being of our communities is one that is not sustainable. And that will lead to what we're seeing now, which is greater levels of unhappiness and isolation that ultimately will lead to the weakening and destruction of society. Yeah, it will. It will, but he's way off. And what, how, why? All right, back to the interviewer asking another question. I want to go to social media next. I've read a lot of things you've said about it, and it seems even the most far-reaching proposals out there are really talking about protecting kids under 13. Okay, so as far-reaching as it is, it's just under 13, okay. You've pointed out that in spite of those rules, younger kids are on social media. And I wonder, given all the research we're seeing, given books like Jonathan Haidt's out there, I'm not familiar with his work, why not go further? Is there a case to view this straightforwardly as we view tobacco, as we view alcohol, as something that simply should not be in minors' lives in any form? Is there any case for allowing minors have access to social media at all? No, there isn't. However, it's not the government's job to do that. I think it's fine to say, hey, this is a public space. There shouldn't be, degenerate things on there. There shouldn't be corn on there because a child could see it any more than there should be, naked people on a billboard. However, I'm sorry, but again, making something illegal doesn't stop it. And I understand that argument doesn't always work. Like murder should still be illegal. We still have that happen, but it should still be illegal because there needs to be repercussions, deterrence. Those people need to be removed from society, right? When it comes to social media and children, that's going to come down to the parents. You're not going to be able to enforce that at all, detect it. You're just not going to be able to. I mean, I suppose all they can do is really tell the platforms you have to require an ID or what have you. But again, just ignoring that parents are failing their children because parenting means setting rules, having structure, and it's not happening. And we're talking, literally, this was entitled Men Are in Crisis. We have not talked about the men. American men are in crisis. That's the title of this. And we're talking about social media. Okay. So the good doctor responds to the question about social media. It is absolutely the right question to ask. And look, let me just say by the background here that social media is not new. It's been around for 20 years. I'm sorry, sir, that's new. Okay. We've been hearing these stories about the harm that it's perpetrating on young people for years. I've talked to so many parents who have lost children to self-deletion after they were mercilessly bullied and harassed online, sometimes by friends, but often by strangers. It's not the bullying and harassing. It's the inability and lack of coping skills to deal with hard things in life. If it wasn't the harassing and the bullying from that, it'd be something else. We are not teaching children how to cope, how to be strong, how to actually be resilient, and to know who they are. And just concentrating on their self-esteem is not helpful. You have to tell them, doesn't matter what you think of yourself, because you're not always going to like yourself. And sometimes you'll be right. Sometimes you won't like yourself and you'll be wrong. God always loves you. It's a powerful thing to teach a child from whence they come and who they are, and that right is right and wrong is wrong. If you can know when someone's being cruel to you, that they're doing wrong, you're not as affected by it, are you? I'm not saying that you insulate someone entirely, but they're far less likely to go the self-deletion route if they have this inner strength rather than this inner nihilism growing. What are you growing in that child? And how many of you guys grew up and you're just like, you survived your childhood, but you were never taught anything. You weren't really taught why something's wrong, why something's right, why this is better than that. I mean, these days they're like, oh, nothing, no hierarchies, nothing is better than something else. I've talked to so many parents, I've lost children, right? Mercilessly bullied and harassed online. Okay. These harms are real and they've existed for a long time. And the fact that we have failed, utterly failed to put in place any safety standards to protect our children. Whose children? They're not our children. You catch that? Families have their children. Government wants to have all your children. Okay, sorry. Safety standards to protect our children, in my mind, reflects just an abdication of our most important responsibility, which is to protect our children. And that's an abdication that Congress needs to address. And that's what I called for last year. Okay, so he's saying that that government's most important responsibility is to protect our children. That's weird. Traditionally, historically, in a Christian-based society, it's the father who protects his children. The mother also, in, conjunction with the father, but under the father's headship, protects the children. And government is saying that it's their job? Well, if you don't yet believe it, hear me now. The breakup of the family, the removal of fathers from the home, none of that's an accident. It's all orchestrated because with father's gone, it creates a vacuum. Who's going to fill that vacuum? Government. Because when you depend on something or someone, they control you, which is why women don't want to have a real husband to depend on. Because if they depend on a man, which my generation was definitely told, you never depend on a man. That's why you got to go get your college education just in case he suddenly becomes abusive and, whatever. You just never depend on a man. Because if you depend on him, he can control you. Well, I guess technically that's true. However, if he loves you and you know his values and his family's values from which he comes, he has the ability to control you, sure. But he doesn't want to. He wants what's best for you. Do you think the government feels the same? No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. The doctor goes on. I think that they have failed to do so. And that is coming at the cost of our kids' well-being and parents' well-being as well. If we cannot make social media safe for kids, if we cannot prove that it is, in fact, safe for kids, then I don't think that it makes sense for kids to be using unsafe products and platforms. As you mentioned, we take that approach with plenty of other products, with tobacco, for instance. Yeah, social media isn't good for any of us. And it's not safe for any of us. I mean, really, what is safe? Just varying degrees. But social media is not really good for any of us. It's especially for women, it's way too tempting to get attention that way and to promote a certain version of ourselves that's not quite true. It's not good. The other thing that it does is it makes you feel like, for women especially, it makes you feel like you're connected and stuff, but you're not. You don't realize that you don't have those connections that you need as a person. But by the time you realize it, you have isolated yourself. So I don't know if y'all notice, But the good doctor definitely was like, if it's unsafe and if it's not good, then da 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 da. Never said, yeah, we shouldn't have kids on social media. How can they go out and say it's not good and it's not safe for kids, but it's fine for adults, right? We know tobacco and alcohol generally are not good for your health. That's why we don't let kids do it in theory, by law. Obviously they still do it, but the reason we make laws against it is because they're not old enough to make bad decisions and say, yeah, I decide to do this harmful thing to myself. I think they don't want to say, yeah, it's bad and harmful for kids, because they don't want to admit that it's bad and harmful for everyone. It would get in the way of how they're shaping our minds. And women are far more susceptible to being influenced by the things in social media than men are. Women are the ones that yes, men do it too, but for the most part, you will see women on their phones in public constantly. They're just always on their phones. Oh boy. Here's the next question for the doctor. Your office, famously under an earlier occupant. It must be Orange Man bad. Your office, famously under an earlier occupant, led the charge on tobacco, framed what tobacco was doing to Americans, even when it was not popular to do so. Obviously, these things are hard to compare, but is social media less dangerous for children than tobacco, based on your judgment and the data we already have? All right. And the doctor says, survey says, sorry, I didn't mean to say it like that. Well, I would put it this way. If you're going to go based on data, the data tells us that some kids find some benefit from their use of social media, but it also tells us that many kids find that they're harmed. If you want to be precise about this, there are no known benefits to tobacco use per se. He didn't just leave it. Okay. So I would actually think of the comparison more to opioids, which in the right circumstances can help a few people, but also harm many people when they're not deployed properly. That's what we're seeing with social media that does not have the kind of safety standards and guardrails that we need. There is no enforcement or no effective enforcement of even the minimal standards that do exist around age. And so you're seeing massive harms perpetrated among kids. Among kids? Okay. And so in the same way that we have taken aggressive approaches, not just to tobacco, but increasingly to opioids, and for any medication that either kids or adults use, we should at least be taking the same kind of rigorous approach when it comes to social media. And we're just not doing that, even though there's concern that's being raised across the board from parents and from kids. The reason I issued a report on social media and youth mental health last year was because the most common question I was getting from parents was about social media, and they wanted to know, is this safe for my kids? Really? Who was asking? Are parents asking government officials? Okay, I guess they are. I'm officially old, you guys. No, sorry, it's a little warm in here. I got it nice and cold before I started filming, but woo! And our report demonstrated that there's not enough evidence to say it's safe for your kids. In fact, there's growing evidence that shows that it can be quite harmful to your children. Oh, now it's your children, not our children? Weird. Okay. It didn't answer. Notice he's like, not enough evidence to say it's safe. Is that how we do things? I don't know, you guys. They still haven't talked about men. It's like Do you think they're ignoring men? They're ignoring them in this article. All right. Here goes the interviewer. Maybe they're going to get to it. I had a conversation with Senator Murphy the other day, and one thing we discussed was masculinity crisis. Here we go. We finally got to it. Maybe they have ADHD. They forgot why they were there. And one thing we discussed was a masculinity crisis, one that's connected to and maybe a subset of the larger crisis of loneliness and isolation, but has its own special characteristics. And I don't think it's only happening in the United States. Can you talk about how you see a crisis in large numbers of men not being able to figure out a workable model of masculinity in a changing country, a country that's moving on gender equality? It's moving on gender equality. That's not. Okay. A lot of men can't quite figure out how to land in the new way of being, even if they've moved away from the old way of being. Good Lord. Okay. So they've finally gotten into the crisis men are having. And they've, out of, what do I have total? Like 19 pages. We're on page, end of 11, beginning of 12, and we're finally going to talk about it. We've talked a lot about parents, which I am fairly certain they only mean one type of parent, and that type of parent would be also known as a mother. By now, I mean, most people don't read this long. Most people only read a headline. So if they read a little bit more, they would learn that, it's only bad people that see things the way we see them. Although they didn't flesh that out, they're just going to leave people to imagine. And some people will imagine. This is the boogeyman. Okay. All right. This has been part 1 of Men in Crisis, an interview with the Surgeon General. Thank you guys for joining me on this. It's been revealing, but not in the way that they thought they were being revealing. It's just more of what they really care about and what the powers that be, the globalists, the overlords, you can use a lot of different words, but we know who we mean. Some people say deep state, but that sort of narrows it down to the United States. And I tend to think, I don't know, I think same people are kind of doing things in multiple countries. But nobody cares. And I mean, I'm not telling you anything you don't know. Nobody cares about men. They can't even write about you guys. Like I was fully prepared for it not to be accurate. I was fully prepared for the whole like, oh, we're evil kind of a thing and right wing this and whatever. I was not prepared for we're just not going to talk about them at all for a while. Literally, the first part of it is really about women and talking about feelings. We need to do more feelings, and we need to this about parent. No, it's so women can be like, I am parenting more and I'm working more. Like, no, you're not. There's only one type of person that's going to believe they're working more and parenting more. Because you can't be that. It's not possible. There's only one type of person that's going to believe that, and it isn't you guys. All right. Oh my gosh. Thank you guys so much. I love y'all and I appreciate you. We're going to do part 2 tomorrow. A little bit at a time. Pace ourselves. And I hope you guys did something today that fed your soul. I hope you have something that gives you a little bit of peace at least. And I will see you on the next one. Take care.